Hey guys, it's Iconic, and in this one, we're going to be going over my most recent build, the strength stacking Puppeteer zombies, which can pretty much run all content including Ubers and T17s very efficiently. Now, as always, I'm going to be going more in depth in the explanation for this guide to make the mechanics we use for the build easier to understand for newer players. It is also important to note that this is going to be a high budget build, and it uses some very niche items which could be hard or expensive or impossible to find on trade. So I'll also be making a crafting video guide so you know exactly how to make those items should you decide to follow this build guide. That should come out ideally a few days or the next day after this video comes out, basically. Now this build revolves around the Baron helmet, which is a unique helmet that gives you an extra zombie for every 500 strength that you have. It gives you leech when you get to 1000 strength, and it also gives your minions half of your strength, which when combined with the Puppeteer Ascendancy node called Rotten Might, it makes it so they inherit basically all your strength. And as a side note, strength also gives 1% increased melee physical damage for every 5 strength you have, or in this case your zombies have, so it gives your zombies some extra DPS on top. And for this build in particular, you're going to want to hit about 1000 strength for the leech, and the 2 extra zombies, of course. Then it becomes a lot less important to scale strength past that, and you instead want to scale other avenues to get even more DPS out of it. If you're enjoying the video, do consider liking and subscribing, as not only does it help out with the algorithm, but we are also less than 100 subs till we get monetized. And also, we have a face reveal on YouTube and stream if we get to 2000 subs before the end of 2025. So if any of that interests you, be sure to hit that sub button. Like I said earlier, this is going to be a high budget build. So if you wanted to actually start progressing this character and didn't quite have the currency to go straight into the high budget setup, I have made a medium budget to help bridge that gap. And if you would like even cheaper than that, I will recommend checking out Sir Mustache the Glorious, or as he is more commonly known as, the Zombie Father. I will throw a link to his YouTube channel in the description, as he has a very in-depth zombie progression guide, which has been fine-tuned over the season, so you'll be in very, very good hands. So I'm going to be breaking up this video into multiple sections, but for starting now, we're going to go over the Ascendancy choices. Now for our Ascendancy choices, we opted in for Rotten Might, which, like we said before, we're strength stacking, so it only makes sense to get a node that says 25% increased strength, and it also gives half of your minions to your strength to minions wrap. Then we're going for Feeding Frenzy. This node has really big quality of life implications early on, because aggressive minions basically means that your minions aggro range is much higher, and as such they are going to be more inclined to stay fighting even while you run around and dodge mechanic and all of those different things. Then we're going for Marination. Marination is very good defensively. It gives you life as extra ES, but even more so minions getting life as extra ES, because one thing to note is zombies are not the tankiest, but even this node really helps them on that front. And then we have Enervating Presence. With Enervating Presence, you can basically see this as a reverse call. It basically means you don't have to worry about 20% of your life when the fight starts, and then you get to start chunking it from 80% downwards. So going on to the item section, our next most important item after the Baron is actually going to be our dagger. Our dagger is a 12-link dagger, i.e. it has 3 gem sockets supported by the square, which is an extra 3, and it has 6 modifiers that all support gems, kind of, on it. So the 12-link. Now this guy cost me about 70-ish divines to craft. More likely than not, it's going to cost you slightly more than that. I think you should expect to spend like 100 divines, maybe slightly less on it. But if you have 100 divines, you should be able to get this, you know, so long as you know how to recomp it. This is going to be an item that is going to be on the crafting guide, because it is kind of complex. And then for the chest piece, important things to note: +1 Spectres. This is how you get your 5th Spectre, and it's a very straightforward recom project to go on. You probably want to fracture the +1 Spectres. Endurance charge implicit, so that we have 100% uptime on our endurance charges, coupled with the perfect warlord giving us instant like 3 every like 9 seconds. Without that implicit, you are going to lose endurance charges, because sometimes you'll be out of range of the warlord. So you want that to be at 12 seconds, because coupled with endurance charge duration here, we're able to get our endurance charges lasting 12 seconds. So very is the sweet spot. Then gloves are straightforward. Boots, these guys are also going to be in the crafting video. They are actually they are very straightforward to craft. They just require certain steps that I'll be going over in that video. And then the amulet, we opt for a replica dragon fang instead of a strength stacking amulet because it's just straight up more damage once we have like 1000 strength. If you're struggling to get 1000 strength, then of course you can go for an Eyes of the Great Wolf with +2 zombies and attributes, but this is just more damage once you have your leech. Just opt for this as soon as you can. Bone ring, straightforward. Amethyst ring, you can go for a second bone ring. I went for a second bone ring, but I'm also on a higher budget than I guess this PoB shows. Kind of, I spent more than the PoB. And then a mage blood, because mage blood really helps with resist on this setup, because with mage blood taking care of as many resists as it's taking care of, we are able to go for even more strength on our gear, you know. So really helps us juice as much strength as possible. Now on my in-game setup, I'm actually much closer to 1000 strength. I think I'm at like 1015, something like that. You really don't want to bother going much beyond 1000 unless you're shooting for like 1500 strength, so keep that in mind. And then for the jewels, we have the large cluster jewel, which the most important affix here is 35% effect, strength, and attack cast speed. Strength is, again, if you're at 1000, you don't have to worry about getting strength there, but it is very, very important in getting to that 1000 at least early on. So this would, I don't know, this could cost you, depending on the strength tier you get, probably less than 20 divines. Split personality, one very important thing to note about split personality is that its position is very important. And if you do not have perfect points on, like, you're not level 100, you want to actually take off these points, because by taking off these points, you create more travel distance between split personality and your starting location. So keep that in mind. Then Watcher's Eye, this is for PDR and phasing, because we are not running a quartz flask. Phasing is important. Now for Forbidden Flesh and Flame, we opt in for Pious Path. What Pious Path does is it makes it so your life regeneration also applies to energy shield while you are on ground. Now this paired with Irrational Doctrine means we have a source of conk ground. Your conk ground effects linger for 4 seconds, and keep in mind Pious Path also makes it linger. So I didn't know this beforehand, but the two effects of linger are actually additive with each other. So in reality, once we go stationary and we proc the conk ground from consecrated ground from Rational Doctrine, the effects stay for 8 seconds for you and your allies. So what I end up doing is I stand still, I convocate my zombies on it, which would give them ES regen equal to their life regen. They have a decent amount of life regen, and from that point on, like 8 seconds later, I'm allowed to move around. And honestly, I don't even put too much thought into this, because if you throw your brand out, you stop moving, you have it for the next 8 seconds. You just naturally have that conk ground or consecrated ground for 8 seconds. And then everything else is very straightforward. Ghastly Eye Jewel for the minion chaos res. Important to get as much chaos res as possible. Something else that was very important to this building it, is getting your zombies to stay alive. Because zombies they're squishy. There's just no other way to put it. They're squishy. This means that effectively we had to go for a minion and what do you call it, life from death node, which made it so whenever a minion died, all your other minions would recover life. And then we paired this with summon phantasms on zombies on your main hand weapon. This makes it so that summon phantasm gets constantly summoned, eventually start overwriting themselves, and then they start dying, because whenever a minion gets overwritten, it counts it dying. And that is basically funding constant health recovery to your zombies. And of course, your phantasms also take advantage of many of the support gems that your raised zombies would if they're on the main hand weapon. So as an example, they use brutality, they use minion damage, impale, they use crits, they can't use multi-strike, they cannot use melee splash. On that note, let's go over the gem section for this setup. We have our raised zombies rather, and they are coupled with an empower, which has to be on your main hand weapon, so it gets the extra 2 levels to give your zombies extra 2 levels. And you have summon phantasms for the life recovery tech I mentioned earlier. This is your squire just supporting your raised zombie all the same. Then your specters are actually going to be in your chest space alongside your guardian, your AG, and your summon chaos golem. And you're going to be paired with feeding frenzy, minion life, and empire, just so feeding frenzy. Convocation frost link in your gloves, automation steel skin. We actually want to switch this to cast when damage taken, and honestly I should also do this in game. So that's on cast when damage taken. These numbers are with steel skin off, so if you wanted to see with steel skin on, you would see, you know, much higher max hits. Arcanist brand with Desecrate, Spirit Offering, and Assassin's Mark. On your Arcanist brand setup, it is important that you have your gems in this order, i.e. Desecrate, Spirit Offering, and Assassin's Mark. We do not use Vulnerability. But the reason you want this is you always want Desecrate to show up before Spirit Offering. So even if your, let's say your green socket came out after your blue, you would then maybe move your Arcanist brand to where the next one would be. Maybe either your Mark or Desecrate. But you don't want Spirit Offering to trigger before Desecrate. You want it 100% after. Just keep that in mind. What's it called? All your auras in the helmet. And the reason we are doing this is because we are opting in for a corrupted helmet with 80% cost and reservation multiplier on it. Now, if you can't afford 80%, you can also go for 90%. Just keep in mind that with 90%, you might have to take a point out of your cluster jewel to wrap around this way instead of up here. But like, you would still be fine all the same with the 90%. And then everything else here is for configuration. Now onto the skill tree section. It's honestly very straightforward. We are opting in for minion crits. Thanks to Feeding Frenzy, we're actually able to get to 100% crit chance without this node. But if you are not quite there in terms of crit scaling, and on that note, Fiend Dagger, because Fiend Dagger is a rune dagger, you want to make sure that the mod you get for, let me see if I can find it, for increased critical strikes is actually the one that with increased crit strike chance as the hybrid, because there is a second one which has increased spell crit chance as the hybrid, and that would very, very obviously hurt your critical strike chance. So keep that in mind. But yeah, you want to make sure you have 100% crit, and then you can path through here. You can always take this if you do not have quite that as much crit and just drop a crit multi-node. If you are struggling to get to 1000 strength, you can drop some of these points here, because that would also make it so your split personality goes through a longer path, and as such has more effect and gives you more flat strength. Like we said earlier, we're going for Life from Death, and Dread March is pretty important because we are trying our best to get as much minion chaos resistance as possible. And we go for Dread March here as well, coupled with Hulking Corpses for the extra taunt. Taunt, of course, being a defensive layer for you, and it just makes it very comfortable when enemies focus on your minions rather than yourself. And then we're getting some crit immunity on the Armor Mastery, alongside as much or as many tattoos with reduced crit chance as possible. Now, this PoB version can only use realistically one. If you wanted to, you could take out 1 point and then put it in Ancestral Knowledge, and that should allow you to get like maybe 2 more tattoos, something like that, to get even more crit immunity, depending on how much how much crit content you run. Essentially, if you're on T17s, you probably want to get more nodes into anti-crit as possible. And of course, we cannot forget Minion Leech. The 10% instant leech is very important, as this allows you to literally just not die so long as your minions are hitting something. Next, for our Spectres, we are actually opting in for 5 Spectres. And the way we get to 5 Spectres is you get your first 3 Spectres by getting your gem level to level 25. That gives you 3 base Spectres. How do we get to level 75? Like we said, we are putting our chest piece, so that gives us an extra 3 levels from Empower, and this is on a level 21 raised Spectre gem, so that puts us at level 24. But we still require 1 more level at least, and that is coming from our boots, which give us +2 to level of raised Spectre gem. This allows us to get to 25, or in this case 26, and get the 3rd Spectre. Then we get an extra 1 from Anointing Death Attunement, which is our 4th Spectre, and then our 5th Spectre is coming from our body armor. which has a delve mod with +1 to the maximum number of specters. And for the specters of choice, as you can always go through the menu to get to see them, but we're using a perfect warlord, a perfect guardian turtle for the PDR, as well as determination aura, dancing sword for impale chance and effect on your minions, because impale is a pretty decent damage increase for them. Then we're also opting in for the perfect forest warrior for its calling strike as well as onslaught. And then lastly, the blood demon. The blood demon is the most expensive but the most important spectre we are currently using, because with the perfect blood demon we are able to get a very powerful pride aura going from our minions. Now it isn't quite as powerful as if you had to run like a level 20 pride aura with all our aura effect scaling, but it's close enough to where we can opt for other auras that would give us more damage, like precision with its crit chance and accuracy, and then haste, stuff like that. Next up, let's talk a bit about our Animate Guardian setup. Now on the Animate Guardian front, we are actually opting in for, as always, Mask of the Stage Demon, which gives our AG a whole lot of life regen so long as he has energy shield, and we are giving him energy shield via marination instead of grave intentions, which is typically what we would do. For the chest piece, we are going for elevated explode chance as well as additional curse. We're going to explain why we need the additional curse here, and also on the windscreen. We're going for 2 extra slots because he's going to be applying 2 curses for quality of life. Now, what are the 2 curses in mind? Our weapon is going to be an explode axe. It is important it is an axe because only axes can get punishment on hit. But with punishment on hit, he's going to be applying extra damage when they fall below half health, and if I remember correctly, reduces the damage they deal. So it's also a defensive layer, as well as corrupted vulnerability on hits gravebinds. So with this setup, he is able to apply 2 curses, and we are able to apply Assassin's Mark to complete the trifecta of curses, giving us a lot of DPS in the process. That about covers it, to be honest. That's the AG. Now we're also going to be going quickly looking at the configuration, just to go over the choices I made in here and just to kind of explain my thought process here. For Frenzy endurance charges, we're getting power charges from Assassin's Mark on hit and from our AG on kill. We're getting Frenzy charges from our AG, endurance charges from Perfect Forest Warrior. Consecrated Ground is going to be from me. Rational Doctrine. Have you been hit recently? Most likely. I'm blocked hit counts as being hit, and even if I take damage, I'm typically not dying. Feeding Frenzy is active. We're targeting the branded enemy, but that doesn't really do anything. And then we have Spectre buff and curses. Enemy is on low life. No, this would inflate the DPS massively. Instead, we calculated how much average increased damage it'd be taking from punishment, taking into account that 80% of their high health life is ignored by our Ascendancy. So that's where 17% comes from. Then debilitated from punishment on hits, which should always apply. And then crush. We are getting crushed from, I believe, Awaken Brutality. Yes, Awaken Brutality gives us crush. And then we have our Perfect Forest Warrior giving us Calling Strike. We have Taunt reducing the damage we take, and we're getting Taunt from our Cluster Jewel. AG is applying punishment, which is 70% increase on average. We have extra curses from his chest and his boots. And then our Ascendancy doesn't actually give us DPS. So this is how I technically calculate it, by applying extra, I guess, calling range. That is the pseudo PoB workaround for calculating the DPS, and it's 30% because we have 10% call from Forest Warrior, and that is also taken into account in this 17%, by the way, just in case you're wondering. And then Rotten Might doesn't actually give minions the strength, so we give 100% more to double whatever its PoB is given from the Baron, basically. And that about covers the configuration. Overall, the build has been very comfy for all content I have run with it, being the defensive and offensive powerhouse that it is. It also was very fun crafting the gear on stream, so if you would like a head start on crafting the gear pieces but you don't know how, you can just find when I made those items on stream on YouTube, as they're all still public and everything. Now, if you made it this far, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps out a lot. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. And with all that said, thank you for watching.